Hi, this is Jen Rubin, Editor-in-Chief of The Contrarian. Delighted to have back with us Representative Chellie Pingree from Maine. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, we enjoyed it last time. I'm sure this will be a lively discussion. Since we last talked, the big ugly bill did pass. And one of the aspects that I was looking at, since the Republicans talk about families so much and children, is what impact it's going to have on children and families in your district. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're looking at now?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we're still thinking about the broad base of the impacts here, but the two key cuts that come through this bill, the Medicaid cuts and the SNAP benefits, will certainly have a huge impact on families and children. We have about 400,000 Mainers who are covered by Medicaid. Huge percentage of those are children. Also, we have 175,000 people covered by SNAP benefits. And we already have some guesses about how many people could lose eligibility and what the impacts will be. And remember, those numbers are in a state of 1.3 million people. So that might sound small if you're in New York State, but it means about a third of Mainers get their health care. So, there's the general loss of eligibility. Your family could lose eligibility. That could impact you. We've talked a lot about the impact on rural hospitals. We've lost hospitals in Maine. One is most recently as a few months ago. Many of our hospitals have already cut back on maternity care. So we have what we call, maternity deserts around the state. So just the very start of life right there could be impacted to pediatric care, a whole variety of other things there. We're also thinking about, even if you're not a Medicaid recipient, we're not extending the tax, the subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. So a lot of Mainers are working two jobs. They've managed to qualify on the exchange for Obamacare, Affordable Care, whatever you want to call it. Well, without those subsidies, that could double their cost. So lots of families will either cut back on care, go uninsured. Whole variety of things could happen. Then just families in general. When you think about the hospitals and the providers who are losing Medicaid coverage, that's going to increase what we call uncompensated care. Your kid gets sick, you don't have insurance, but you still go to the emergency room for their fever, their earache, anything else. Well, those hospitals are going to shift their cost to somebody else. So whether it's just through your own insurance coverage, it'll go up, or those hospitals having to shift that coverage. When we passed Obamacare, I was lucky enough to Congress then. One of the things we talked about all the time was charity care, uncompensated care, and the shifts in healthcare coverage. We're just going back to that era. We're going back, nearly 20 years and where we used to be. And the big goal of expanding Medicaid and all these other things was to get more people covered so we'd have more people paying into the pool and less that we had to make up somewhere else with health insurance. But all that's going out the door, out the window, whatever you want to call it. And then we go back to food. I mean, come on, we're the wealthiest country in the nation. And the one place we've gone to fund these tax cuts for the billionaires is in food and feeding hungry families. And we know that getting a healthy start for young kids, brain development, everything, getting nutritious foods, healthy fruits and vegetables. Oh my God, I am going to rip my hair out. It's just like we spent so many years trying to get more of these programs in, healthy, fresh fruits and vegetables. Here we're listening to Maha every day telling us, it's all about food and medicine and good health. Well, forget that, because we're getting rid of the thrifty food plan. So nobody will get an increase in their SNAP benefits, which is already woefully low. We don't know how this will impact things like GusNIP, the Double Bucks program, which means if you take your SNAP benefit card to a farmer's market, you could get double the value in fresh fruits and vegetables. We don't know what will happen there. But another thing that will impact is that families who lose their SNAP benefit coverage because of changes in eligibility or states having less money, that also is a number that impacts our free lunch program. So Maine expanded its free lunch program and now covers it through the state, but they get federal dollars to help with that too. But you lose your SNAP eligibility, you're no longer eligible on that. While the state will still cover you, the state won't have the funds from the federal government. And then you wrap all this stuff into this ridiculous notion of the Republicans that states should have more skin in the game. So Maine is now going to be liable for $60 million more. paying for SNAP benefits through our own state instead of getting it from the federal government. Well, how's that going to impact our state budget, as well as these Medicaid cuts, and what's the state going to do to make up for that? And don't get me started on all the other things happening in the appropriations process, even down to like EPA permitting funding is going to go shifted back to the states. States' budgets are going to feel just a horrendous impact, and that's going to impact all kinds of things that matter to kids, their education funding, general welfare services. I mean, we can go on and on and on, but families are going to be hurt. I've been listening to a lot of the things that are, our state is talking about now, even the Chamber of Commerce, which federally supported this bill. When the local chamber leader came on to our call-in talk show, he said the well-being of our workers is a critical part of what happens here. So, a lot of people are going to work every day, but they get their health care through Medicaid, Maine Care, or the Obamacare plan. They're getting food subsidies through that. It's just going to have a huge impact overall on our budgets. And one of my big worries overall in this bill is how we've reduced revenues because of these continuation of tax cuts. Added to the debt. So that's going to mean Republicans are going to say, no, we can't spend any more money because we just added to the debt. But what's that going to do for like federal funding for housing, the very kinds of things that keep our workers working, not to mention all the workers who are being rounded up in these immigration raids. And we just gave them, billions of dollars more to do that. It's an overall nightmare. And I'm really worried about the long-term structural impact that we're going to have both on the states, but at the federal level. I think the appropriations process, I'm a member of the committee, it's down the tubes. I mean, I just don't know what we're going to do when we go back next week.
It's really rather shocking. There was an interesting poll out that should impress maybe the Republicans are always talking about families wanting to have more kids, that the number one reason that people are not having more children or having any children is cost. And it seems in each of these areas, whether it's food, whether it's healthcare, education, with the cutback and Pell Grants, with freezing grants to after school programs and the rest, we are increasing costs on family. One of the other downsides, it seems, is that now Medicaid, if you are a parent, you have generally, and with childcare duties, you've generally been exempt. Now, if your child is 14 or older, you still have to go out and work. So are you concerned about another generation of latchkey kids? I thought we were in favor of parents staying home to watch their kids, to mentor their kids, to make sure their kids have constructive things to do after school. It seems like just an assault on the family.
Oh, this is the most anti-family, quote, pro-family party I've ever seen. And you're right about that. That was just last week. They rescinded some of those educational funds that went to after school programs. I mean, how
Yes.
many years have we fought for after school care for parents who are working till 5 or 6 o'clock and can't be home with their kids? So absolutely, that's a huge issue. You're right. They changed the age limits. In SNAP benefits and Medicaid as well. Originally in the ag markup, they changed that age till 7. And we were just screaming in the markup that night saying, are you serious? You're going to leave your 7-year-old home alone? Well, 14, I was just talking to one of my colleagues the other day and saying, for a lot of us, we worried most when our teenagers were coming home alone.
Yes.
That's when the age when you really want to be there with them, or you want to make sure that somebody's there to let them in to get to an after school activity, make sure they go to sports, or they need a ride somewhere. So again, this is the party that says, we don't need immigrants because we're going to have so many more American children. We're going to make our own workers in this country. They say this kind of crazy shit, and then they do everything they can to turn back. I've heard that from so many young people. I can't afford a house. Why do I want to have kids in my 1-bedroom apartment? I can't afford to get rid of my student loans. And you're right, they've messed with the student loan program. It's the first time they've ever changed the program while we're in the middle of it. They've limited the eligibility for things like doctors and lawyers, so people need to go on to higher education, how much you can borrow. I also think a hidden, issue here, and I know the Republicans think we're full of baloney when we say this, but they've taken everything out related to climate change. And I hear so many young people, my own kids included, who say, what kind of world am I bringing my children into? And young people, it's just painful to hear young people say, like, I don't know if I have the right to have children because I'm so worried about the planet and what will they face. I mean, I worry about my children and grandchildren and what are we leaving them. Imagine being of childbearing age and saying, do I have this right? And because they've taken away, renewable energy funding, they're disregarding the use of climate change. My subcommittee funds the EPA right now in the current budget, which isn't finalized, and we haven't seen the real version, but it's a 55% cut to the EPA because everything about climate change is taken out. They rescinded billions of dollars of funding for clean air, clean energy in the big bullshit bill. And so, that's already gone.
Yeah.
How are you going to have
We
more
have
kids in this country?
it's really stunning. One of the other things, obviously, is the administration's just mind-boggling idea that they want to get rid of or downsize FEMA. We've just had this horrible, horrible tragedy in Texas. And I'm sure your colleagues from Texas, the very same ones who have been advocating for getting rid of FEMA, are going to be the first ones in line, as you would imagine, for their states. Is there any recognition on the emergency side? Climate change obviously plays into this because of extreme weather, but on the FEMA side, that we need functional government. We need government there so that when tragedy is imminent, there are responsible people in those positions to protect people. Are you at all optimistic that there'll be at least a debate about that, a discussion about that?
Well, we've already been through some portions of that in the appropriations process, and there was, literally no recognition. The president's got this line, and I hear a lot of the Republicans say it, like, we're going to turn FEMA back to the states. They know what's best to do and they can handle it. Well, good on you. We do have operations in all of our states, but we get our money through FEMA. So of course the states need to administer these things. Of course we know best, but you can't take away the money and then say states have the random amounts of billions of dollars available in their treasuries when horrible disasters like Texas strike. We're expected to have one of the worst hurricane seasons on record, if that's what the predictions say. And I think it's important to remember it's not just FEMA. Remember, this was also, questions were raised about the National Weather Service, and I believe those people are working hard and doing an incredibly diligent job, but we've already lost so much staffing in so many positions. I represent fishermen. These guys are worried about what happens if we don't have good predictions about the weather and what happens into the future. In our budget in the Interior Committee, we have USGS. Now, nobody thinks about the U.S. Geological Service, but that's where the stream gauge monitors are. We haven't gone through that budget funding this year. And while many Republicans believe in keeping the stream gauge monitors, we're down about a quarter of them right now. That is exactly where you get that information about what's happening to the river. Is it up? Is it down? Are we having a drought? Or are you about to face a future flood? And I'm sure that funding will be dramatically cut. So the impact of what they're doing overall to government, to the staff people who provide us with this information, the anti-science nature of all this, they took away the FEMA funding that was to do resilience and plan for the future, like communities just like these ones in Texas. What do we need to do to plan for the future? I mean, a flood like that is hard to stop, but better prediction. Maybe there are some ways that they could have done some other things. I'm not going to second guess the poor people of Texas. That's a horrible thing. But all of these things we know going into the future, the federal government has to fund these things. States don't have the resolve, the funding, or the ability always to think in the big picture what they're going to need.
Absolutely. I want to end on this. It's summertime. That's a big tourist season for Maine. What about your Canadian visitors? Are you seeing those people come in the numbers that you're used to, or are you seeing a drop off in that, which obviously affects the huge tourism that Maine depends upon?
Absolutely. We're down border crossings by very high numbers. I haven't gotten the most recent numbers for the 4th of July, but some of our communities, which have a tremendous number of Canadian visitors, if you go to Old Orchard Beach, Maine, the street signs are in French and in English because we love when the Quebecers come. No, we're definitely down, and how that will impact our overall season. We're also down Europeans. Overall, you can talk to people who are coming this way. They'll say the planes from Europe are much less full than they they normally
Yes.
are. But Canadians are our big, they're our good friends. They're our next door neighbors, but they don't want to come to the United States. They're either mad at us or they're just worried about what's going to happen at the border crossing, or if somebody's going to check the social media on their phone. I mean, it's crazy what's going on out there.
Well, it's a very distressing time. We hope that some of your Republican colleagues wake up, and if not, maybe the voters will do something about that next year. So thanks as always. You're just a wealth of information. We love having you.
Anytime.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.